Tell me what you did last week or get fired. No, don't do that. Yes, do that. If you don't, then you're fired or semi-fired. But wait, it was all just a test, and you failed. You failed. So here's one last. Tell me what you did last week. No, don't do that. Are you confused? Because I am. I was confused trying to write that today, trying to make sense of the back and forth. And I'm trying to make sense of this from the outside. Imagine if you were on the inside. Imagine if you were a federal worker trying to figure out who exactly to listen to right now. Is it Elon Musk? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Kash Patel? Is it HR? Donald Trump? It beats me. And now to add to the confusion, there's a mass resignation, except this time it's DOJ staffers who are collectively calling it quits. 21 of them signing on to a letter that says DOJ is putting the country in danger, saying, quote, "We will not use our skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize American sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize DOJ's actions." So what in the world is going on? Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Vaughn, I truly do not understand what is happening right now within the federal government. And if you are a federal worker, who you're supposed to be listening to, whether Donald Trump and Elon Musk are on the same page, and whether Donald Trump is actually secretly saying things behind the scenes to other government heads. Can you make any sense of this?
I think that through all of this, it's so important that we take into the context, Katie, the number of government workers, myself, I know you, other colleagues have talked to, that say that there is anger, there is concern, there is consternation and confusion just to do their daily work. And the execution of that work at a time where their friends and colleagues have either been fired, placed on administrative leave, or have been left in limbo. And those that are still existing are trying to figure out whether to reply to an email or not. And in the case of Phil Sussman, he is a 10-year Army veteran who served in one of his tours in northern Syria. I just talked to him a few moments ago. He was working at USAID. He actually moved his family here in Washington, D.C. to work in the Middle East Bureau of USAID on the Syria desk. His family home in Florida, in St. Petersburg, was washed out in a hurricane last year, and he started this job in November. And just last night, late last night, I talked to him just about an hour after he received a termination letter. And I want to read one line to you, Katie, here. In his termination letter, it said very specifically, quote, "I am terminating you on the basis that it is in the best interest of the U.S. government." I asked that Army veteran, Phil Sussman, about what that message meant to him and his message to not only President Trump, but Elon Musk. Take a listen.
I think that there are consequences to the things that are happening right now. And we may not feel it now, and most of the country may not even feel it now, but we all will at some point. And I think it's important that we put a face, we put faces on what's happening. These are real American lives being lost right now. This isn't a meme. This isn't a tweet. This is myself and my wife and my 3 children who don't know how we're going to pay the mortgage next month. You know, this is someone that has spent people that I work with that have spent their entire lives dedicated to helping others, sacrificing for others. I worked with an Afghan immigrant. She came over as a child, and her entire life has been about supporting the United States and our mission overseas and helping others. And she's losing her job. We're all losing our job. The people that truly care, like the selfless members, like some of the most selfless members of our society. You know, as selfless as any person I ever worked with in uniform carrying a gun, the people I worked side by side with in USAID, who truly cared, and we're casting them aside, and we're saying that you don't matter.
Phil Sussman said it's about more than families like his own or the other thousands of employees, Katie. But he said, for instance, in his position, he worked as effectively a liaison between USAID and the partners on the ground distributing humanitarian aid in Syria. There is now a void because of his termination. It's stories like that here that I think will increasingly rise to the forefront of this conversation as we watch Elon Musk effectively go through and continue this purge of federal workers across the federal government.
Hearing from him and hearing that he's going to struggle to pay the mortgage next year, I mean, that is a human face on this. At the same time, you hear that, you see Elon Musk running around with a chainsaw and laughing about how they're cutting government workers and claiming that all these folks are corrupt. And you just saw, one of the people that got laid off right there, putting, again, a human face on this, not a meme, as he said. Ryan, you're also getting a lot of blowback for lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, Democrats who want Democrats to stand up and be louder about this and to fight harder, and Republicans facing voters in town halls who say, I'm sorry, I didn't elect a king. I elected a guy who would be a part of a system of government, and you're the other guy or gal I elected, and you're a part of that system, too. What are you doing? Why are you abdicating your responsibility? Has any of that feedback come back into the halls of Capitol Hill? Any changes that you're seeing?
I think, Katie, what we're seeing develop right now is at least a degree of mild criticism from a very small group of Republican members, not necessarily about the end goal for Elon Musk and the Doge operation, but the way that they're going about implementing it. And I do think it is in part, as you rightly point out, the heat that they're taking in these public town halls, the volume of calls that they're getting to their offices as well. And what we saw play out here today is that you are now, and something that we couldn't find a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, people willing to criticize the administration's process here, saying that they need to go about trying to execute this goal of reducing the federal workforce with a little bit more dignity, with a little bit more grace. Take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I'm all for trimming the government, but I'm all for also doing it in a deliberate manner that allows people to adjust in their lifestyles.
Look, I think they need to be more targeted and they need to be more thoughtful. I think so. Things are happening a little bit too fast and furiously, I think, and that's why we've had some of these unintended consequences.
Just a little bit of humanity and dignity to the process, I think, is what many of the Alaskan federal employees are asking for, and I don't think that that's asking for too much.
And that's Lisa Murkowski there at the end from Alaska, who I spoke to yesterday. And she was very interesting in the way that she went about this. She said that that email that you were talking about earlier, Katie, was intimidating for these federal government employees, and that these are the folks that make sure that our wildfires don't grow out of control in our nation's forests. They're the ones that are trying to research drugs to try and cure ALS. She had a long list of these things that she says federal government workers are on the front lines trying to fix and protect. And she said the way that they're being treated right now just is unfair, and this is not the way to go about completing this mission of making government more efficient.
Yeah, the second lawmaker, they're saying that, I just threw my pen across the table. The second lawmaker there saying that these are unintended consequences. I think that the issue here is that these are the intended consequences. If you're somebody like Elon Musk, they intentionally are not doing this surgically. I keep saying surgically. No, they're just doing this. They're taking a hammer to all of it. They're taking a chainsaw, as Elon Musk was waving around. The other weird thing that I don't have a good answer for is who exactly is running the show here. It appears to be Elon Musk, but the White House won't say it is. And then today, Caroline Leavitt was asked this again by a reporter, and here's what she said.
Can you tell us who the administrator of Doge is?
Again, I've been asked and answered this question. Elon Musk is overseeing Doge. No, Elon Musk is a special government employee, which I've also been asked and have answered that question as well. There are career officials at Doge. There are political appointees at Doge. I'm not going to reveal the name of that individual from this podium. I'm happy to follow up and provide that to you. But we've been incredibly transparent about the way that Doge is working.
They've been incredibly transparent, but they cannot name the individual in charge of Doge, the administrator, from that podium. I'm sorry, Lisa, is this a national security position? Is this person working undercover? Is there a reason why their identity can't be known by the American public?
I don't think so. And Katie, you and I both know that every 4 years, the identity of thousands of political appointees is revealed in something called the Plum Book, which gathers up people of that status or designation. The other thing that's really interesting is that not only can the White House not tell the press corps who the administrator of Doge is, but yesterday in a Washington federal courthouse, a DOJ lawyer also couldn't say who the Doge administrator was. Judge Colleen...
Couldn't say or wouldn't say?
Could not say. did not have that information at their disposal. They were asked what Mr. Musk's role was with respect to Doge. And the Department of Justice lawyer said, all I can say is he's a close advisor to the president. But when asked and pressed who the administrator of Doge was, the person did not know. And I think that's by design. I think they are making this up in some respects as they go along because they do not want Elon Musk to have to be a defendant to some of these lawsuits. You and I both know, and we've been tracking a variety of different lawsuits against Doge, including with respect to their access to payment system information. That's what this hearing yesterday was about. But if you can't even name the proper defendant, you can't get off the floor. You can't get.
Can't there be a lawsuit to get a name? I mean,
yeah, sure. You can name a Doe defendant, for example. You can say Katie Tur versus John Doe number 1.
What about Katie Tur versus the Department of Government Efficiency?
Sure. But I think what they are trying to do here is sort of obfuscate who is actually running Doge and what Doge is, because in most cases, an agency that has the power that Doge does needs to be run by somebody who is Senate confirmed. And as we all know, that person is not Elon Musk.
You know, we try in this show to give you information, to straighten things out, to help you understand a moment, to take what is confusing and to make it understandable. And I'm leaving this segment now more confused than when I started it. I guess that is by intention.